Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to share with you guys the build guide for my Bleed Perforate Gladiator. And without further ado, let's begin with the build intro. Alright, so for the Gladiator, we'll be using slam skills. I'm using Perforate, but I just want to give a heads up. You can actually use multiple other skills as well if you want. Some of the only thing that you need to factor in is that it needs to be usable with our build, which is using one-handed axe, so no two-handed weapon. It needs to have high attack damage multiplier. As you can see here, for example, this one, Crushing Fist, has 2000% base, but this is a retaliate skill, so yeah. And then the build must not have any physical to elemental damage conversion, so it needs to be fully physical for bleed to happen. And there's actually a few skills that you can consider. I'm using Perforate, but a second skill that you can use are actually Sunder, which has 629% attack damage. I just don't like using Sunder because the AoE behavior is like a corridor in front of you, a rectangle, and I prefer a circular slam that hits at the back of my character as well. So that's why I use Perforate. And also you can use Lip Slam of Groundbreaking, which also has a very high attack damage multiplier. I just like Perforate because it has a more area of effect multiplier while in Sand Stance, which we will be using. But again, you can choose whichever slam that you prefer playing with. And then typically builds either go all into non-crit and use resolute technique so that they don't have to solve the accuracy problem, or go into crit but they need to solve the accuracy problem. This build functions, this build is a hybrid where it has both crit and non-crit portion. The non-crit portion is the one we use to apply bleed, and we'll be using Lycoside to replace resolute technique, where it has your hits can be evaded, full stop. It doesn't prevent your build from critting. And then we'll also have Cyclone Link with Rupture, which applies the debuff where it says here target takes 29% more damage from bleeding per rupture, and bleeding expires 25% more quickly per rupture. And Rupture can be applied up to 4 stack, which has a 3-second duration per stack. And our Cyclone will be linked to some increased critical strike support gem, so that Rupture can be applied using Cyclone to debuff our bleed. And since we'll be using Slam, which we'll be linking with Fist of War, there's a downtime anyway with our slams when we won't be slamming. So in between the slams, we'll be using Cyclone to apply the Rupture on the enemy. And then finally, the combo we'll be using to aggravate the bleeding will be Tempest Rising, where it says here it has this line: increased duration of element on enemy, applies to bleed. Damaging element deals damage faster, also applies to bleed. But this is the most important line: you and your enemies in your presence count as moving while affected by elemental ailment, which is basically aggravate for bleeding. So it allows your bleed DPS to buff up passively and persistently. We'll be comboing that with Summon Skitterbots, which applies chilling and shocking aura, which is an elemental ailment. So chill slows down the enemy, and shock increase damage taken. Both are effects that we'll be using for the build. Okay, up next is the pros and cons of the build, and as usual, I'm just going to read it off the notes section inside my POB that I've already created. Okay, before the pros and cons, just a little bit on leveling. For early game, I recommend to start with Splitting Steel as a duelist, and then you fully transition to the slam version after you've done the 4 following things. You allocate as much chance to bleed as possible to cap to reach 100%. So you need to basically speedrun your way into this node right here, chance to bleed, and then here there's a chance to bleed here, and then here chance to bleed, and here chance to bleed. So aim for the chance to bleed to reach 100%, and then Recommended change to Perforate or any slam, whichever you wish, after first Ascendancy, and you get Gratuitous Violence, which is this one, so that bleeding enemies you kill explode. Very important for Perforate, because Perforate has this dead zone in between the spikes that you don't really... it feels kinda janky. And also, recommend you to get... preferably 20% quality, because it increases the number of spikes, which means it has increased coverage for your slam. And then you socketed Auto Exertion plus Seismic Cry for more AoE. And then during leveling, get some chance to aggravate on passive 3. You can either get that from Bloodletting Notable or Bleed Mastery for 25%. Bloodletting has 10%, which is here. Chance to aggravate bleeding on target you hits with attack, and you combine that with Cyclone, or here from Bleeding Mastery at the bottom one where it says 25% chance to aggravate bleeding on targets you hit with exerted attack, which is what you get from your Auto Exertion plus Seismic Cry. Anyway, pros and cons. So it has, well, very fast clear for melee build, but not like super. I mean, I wouldn't call it very fast, maybe just call it fast clear for me. It has very good survivability. As you can see, the build has an effective hit pool of 400k. It has decent DPS. I'm currently sitting at 13 million with 10 second, or is it 10 second War of Attrition contribution, and it can scales up to maximum DPS of here 25 million. So yeah, it's respectable enough considering the build focuses on survivability, and it's very cheap to start and gear, which I guess is why Bleed Slam are actually meta. So the cons, it's melee, and the DPS can be expensive to stack up because it requires a lot of these uniques that can be quite expensive and hard to get during Leaguestart. For example, Tempest Rising, which only drops from endgame bosses. Okay, up next is the offensive and defensive layers of the build. And offensive layer, so number one, Bleed Slam. So it's kind of meta. So slams are a great way to apply bleed due to things like Fist of War. So I don't really need to explain that. And then crit or non-crit bleed hybrid. So I already explained this inside the bleed intro. We apply bleed through normal means and use the crit version to apply Rapture debuff, which is one of the best way to ramp up bleed DPS. And then Lycoside to replace Resolute Technique to solve all our crazy problem. And then we have Persistent Aggravate or Count as Moving, and this one also covered inside the build intro. We use Tempest Rising and Summon Skitterbot. Okay, so let's focus on the defensive layer. Okay, we have, the build has armor, less damage taken, stacking from multiple sources. Okay, armor we only get from our 3 and gear, not much. We have 24k also with our using our flask. Okay, but less damage taken. Okay, less damage taken. We have here endurance charge uptime from block notable deflection, and the build has 5 endurance charges, and the way to sustain the uptime is using this one, deflection, 25% chance to gain endurance charge when you block, and we have almost 90% block and spell block chance, so we can sustain our endurance charge that way. Fortify, from Fortify Mastery we get it from here, Steadfast, and then Fortify Mastery, melee hits Fortify. So our slams will grant us fortification. And then we have Unique Curse Amulet, Impressions for Maddening Presence. It says here, gain Maddening Presence for 10 seconds when you kill a rare or unique enemy. This is mostly for mapping, and it applies an AoE around your character that debuff the enemy to have 10% less damage taken and 10% less action speed. And then there's a new exceptional gem for 3.28, which is Eldritch. New exceptional. Sorry, let me. Eldritch Blasphemy. So save that. Where is it? Okay, here. Eldritch Blasphemy. Bottom line says enemies have malignant madness if they have been in auras from supported skill for more than 5 seconds. And it also applies the same thing as the one from Impressions, 10% less damage taken and 10% less action speed. Okay. Second layer, we have Lucky Block plus High Life Regen. Okay, Block is from Gladiator's Ascendancy plus 3. So all the block nodes here and here. And then these two Gladiator nodes here for 50% chance to block from shield. So our block chance on shield doesn't matter. And then finally, Modern Skill for chance to block is lucky if you block recently. Life Regen we get from Passive 3, from Consecrated Ground, from Flask, and then from Life Regen from Gears. And then finally, we apply Massive Slow Effect. This is because our blocks doesn't allow hits to pass through. So one of the way to either increase the reliability of our block is, number one, either you increase the less damage taken to allow the block that actually pass through to be mitigated, but we already did that from our first defensive layer. For our third defensive layer is we decrease the number of attacks per second from the enemy, which is by slowing them down to a crawl. It's not freeze, but the slow is reliable enough from all that stacking. We get that from Chill Aura from Skaterbots. We get Temporal Chain Aura using that Eldritch Blasphemy, where our Impressions has Temporal Chain and Vulnerability has no reservation if cast as an aura. And then the Maddening Presence and Malignant Madness from the first defensive layer that I have covered. Okay, up next is the Mastery, Ascendancy, etc. Right. So, for the Mastery, the important Mastery will be Fortify Mastery, where melee hits 45. Mana Mastery for Reservation Efficiency. Damage over time Mastery for Skill Effect Duration. And Bleeding and X Mastery for more damage. Okay, for our Ascendancy, we're taking number 1, Gratuitous Violence. And then number 2, depending on your whether you need more DPS or more survivability, you can choose either route. If you need more DPS, you can go to Jagged Technique to reliably aggravate. If you need more defense, you can go all the way for the block and Modern Skill for Lucky Block. And for me, I recommend to go block first. This is because Jagged Technique only allows you to aggravate, but we have actually other ways to aggravate from the tree, from the leveling guide, until you get the proper aggravate setup. So it's not really that important in my opinion, but your mileage may vary, so it's up to you. You want to go defense or you want to go offense? You want to go offense, you go aggravate first, and then you get block and block. Or if you want to go defense, you go block, and finally you get aggravate. But by that time, usually you can go for War of Attrition already for just more damage. The longer enemies stay in your presence. For Bandit, we kill all for that 1 point. For Pantheon, we take Brine King for freeze immunity, and then Lislata for Life Flask. Okay, next we'll move over to the gem setup for the build. And for our main skill, we'll be using Perforate. Again, you can choose whatever slam that you like to use. The link will be Fist of War, Unbound Ailment, Melee Fist, Brutality, Volatility. Okay, the last 3, Melee Fist, Brutality and Volatility, are all damage skill gem, support gem. So I don't need to cover that. But Fist of War is important for AoE. And then Unbound Ailment for duration of bleed. So these two are very important for the build, and when you can, prioritize these two first. Okay, something to highlight, you need to use Chance to Bleed support gem that you get during Act 1 until you get 100% chance to bleed. And do not use the Deadly Ailment because it reduces your attack damage, your hit damage here, which also spoils your way of getting Fortify. So just 2 things you need to take note. Lip Slam will be linked to faster attack, so just standard Lip Slam. Okay, for our Aura Reservation, these are the things that you can socket anywhere. Here, you can socket anywhere. We have Summon Skitterbots, Pride, Blood and Sand, Auto Exertion plus Seismic Cry. Okay, Skitterbots is for Tempest Rising combo. Pride, just to have enemies take increased physical damage. Blood and Sand to allows our character to change to Sand Stance and gives more AoE. And then finally Auto Exertion for and plus Seismic Cry for also more AoE and to have exerted attack. For our Cursed Aura, we have Vulnerability plus Temporal Chain. Usually, you can get a Vulnerability version much cheaper. One aura version early in the league, and the 2 mods version is usually much later once people have fought the stronger version of the endgame boss. And you use normal Blasphemy during leveling and change to Eldritch version, the exceptional version, at the end game once you get level I think 72. I think was the is the level requirement. Okay, cast when damage taken, we link to Molten Shell because we have high enough armor, so it's just a gut skill. Okay, for our Cyclone, we have Cyclone plus Rupture plus increased critical strike plus power charge on crit to allow the build to get power charge for more crit chance. So Cyclones just to multi-hit the enemy to apply the Rupture debuff in between slam. So in between slams, and the increased critical strike and power charge on crit is just to raise our crit chance to high enough level. As you can see here, from our Cyclone we have 30% crit chance, and it hits almost 8 times per second, which is in my opinion already enough to reliably apply the Rupture. And then finally Blood Rage for more attack speed. And finally we reach the end section of the build, which will be on my character gears. Alright, so for gear, we want to use a high Fizz attack roll, and for mapping, you can actually use Jack the Axe, which is a very decent unique for one-handed bleed builds, and until you transition to the endgame version, which will be using River Axe. As you can see here from my build, it doesn't from my gear, it doesn't have very high physical damage per second, but the most important stats that we want are the minimum and maximum physical damage, which it has there 225 to 582, plus we have a crafted plus 19% physical damage over time multiplier. So we just need more damage on our gear. We don't even need attack speed or critical strike chance. Our critical strike, for example, we have 5% here as base, but our Cyclone have 30% with the gem setup. For our offhand, we have Lycosidae, which is the shield that we want for your hits can be evaded, so that's best in slot. You can use a corrupted one. Okay, for helmet, we have Usurper's Penance, which has here 4% to damage over time multiplier for bleeding per frenzy charge. Bleeding you inflict deals 4% faster per frenzy charge, and also 29% chance to gain frenzy charge on critical strike at close range, and this pairs really well with Cyclone to get that frenzy charge. For our body armor, we want defense and resistances, and also an open prefix to craft block chance. For implicit, we want using Searing Exarch and Eater of Worlds currency to apply Pride Effect and non-curse aura. For our glove, we have double influence rare, also same as body armor, so it's a rare gear. We want life, resistances, and crafted area of effect. For implicit, we want exited attack damage plus Fizz dot, which is here. Exited attack deals 22% increased damage and plus 6% to physical damage over time multiplier. And then boots, we want Tempest Rising. Already explained this multiple times. That's best in slot. Leaguestart's Coil for more damage, and you want high roll of more maximum physical attack damage and low roll of less minimum physical attack damage. It goes up to 40%, so try to get both high and low when both high at maximum and low at minimum, and then use Catalyst to increase that range even further. Now mine have 45 and 37 after using Catalyst. And then rings, I use Kikazaru plus rare. As always, if you know me, I like Kikazaru for that persistent life regen. It's like a free vitality aura. And then double rare, just use life and resistances, and also on one of the ring you need to roll intelligence. Just on one of the ring it will be enough. For our amulet, we need to take Impressions. Vulnerability and Temporal Chain will be the best, but you can use Enfeeble, but I prefer Temporal Chain because not only it slows down the enemy, but it also lengthens the length of the bleed on the enemy. So for me, Vulnerability and Temporal Chain is the best. Anointment, you need to use Whispers of Doom because otherwise you cannot apply 2 curses on the enemy. You can only apply 1, so only 1 would work. For our Jewels, Lethal Pride near Marauder 3 here, and to take Feast Damage and Life, and Feast Damage, Life, Feast Damage, Strength. Light of Meaning here for increased physical damage, socketed at the Duelist tree for decent amount of coverage of affected notables. And then Lush Cluster Jewel, okay, Lush Cluster Jewel here, master the fundamentals for Feast Damage plus Resistances, Feast Damage plus Attack Speed for Furious Assault, and Battle Hardened, Feast Damage plus Armor. Medium Cluster Jewel, we take Circling Oblivion for increased duration of ailment, and here Exposure Therapy for Chaos Resistance against damage over time, but you can also take, I believe the other one is called Student of Decay, which also increases your Chaos Resistances. And then for Small Cluster Jewel, we want Destructive Aspect for Pride has increased mana reservation efficiency, and also 12% increased area of effect of Aura skill. This one also affects Blasphemy, so coincidentally it applies to our Blasphemy Aura as well. And then for Jewels, I'm taking here we want Life, Damage with Bleeding, Damage with one-handed weapon, and Effect of Focuses. Effect of Focuses is very nice to stack on these small nodes because it usually doesn't raise their price that much. So same, Life, Damage, Effect of Focuses. It's okay. And finally, we go down to Flask. We have Bleed Life Flask, Silver, Granite, Basalt, and Sulfur. So all no unique flask. All of them you need to take Flagellant for prefix, so that to get that gain 3 charges when you are hit by enemy, because we don't evade enemies at all. Because we're also taking here, forgot to mention this, Unwavering Stance, where you can evade. We always receive hits from enemy, and also coincidentally it also functions even when you block, because it only counts when you are hit, not when you take damage. And then for our suffixes on the flask, we want Reduce Effect of Curses, Armor, Crit Chance, and finally I like to take Regenerate Life per second. And that's pretty much it for the build guide for my Bleed Perforate Gladiator. I didn't do anything much novel at all, so I didn't think there's much to talk about other than number 1, you don't need to use Perforate, you can use other slam skills that you want. Number 2, I'm playing around with a crit non-crit hybrid build that do not use Resolute technique, so that's something a little bit different that I didn't see people using. And finally, I'm stacking a lot of slow effect using things like Temporal Chain, Skitterbots, and the Maddening Presence from Impressions, and the new Exceptional Gem. Otherwise, I think the build is simple enough. But of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section down below, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. Okay, I think that's about it for the build. Thank you very much, and see you next time, Exile.